If there's anything we've learned in the past 2 years, is that you can't be too prepared. Whether it's toilet paper or Lysol wipes, people went kinda nuts when they heard about these essentials. Now, I don't think buying 300 rolls of toilet paper is the best way to stay safe during a pandemic, but at the time, people didn't really know any better. This is all new information to us. It's scary. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to buy. We don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. But a recent report brought to life from US investigators hints that China has been preparing for this longer than we thought. I'm Taylor McWaters, and today on Life's Biggest Questions, we ask, why is China preparing for World War III? So hit that like button, sit back, and let's talk about it. The first case of COVID-19 was reported in the central Chinese city of Wuhan in late 2019, and the world hasn't been the same since. The disease quickly became a pandemic, with the death toll currently over 3.3 million worldwide. Officials are trying to get to the bottom of it at this point. How did this happen? Where did it come from? These are things we need to know so that we can prevent it from happening again in the future. It feels like life is rapidly changing. As the pandemic goes on, there's new rules put in place every other week. Businesses are open, and now they're closed. They're open again, now they're closed. New variants are coming in to join the party day after day, and the most important thing is still for everybody to stay safe and to do your part keeping those around you safe. I mean, we're still in it. Up in Canada, we're still working from home, hence all of this. Nobody was prepared for these last 2 years at all, but apparently China had been preparing for a third world war for over 6 years now. According to the dossier by the People's Liberation Army, scientists and health officials examined the manipulation of diseases to make weapons in a way never seen before. This document was recently obtained by US investigators, and it's loaded. The paper the US State Department got insists that these biological weapons will be the key for victory in such a conflict. Now, the paper highlights perfect conditions to release said bioweapons, and in the document it's shown the impact that it could have on the enemy's medical system. So with this recent evidence showing that Beijing considered the military potential of SARS coronaviruses from back in 2015, there are officials who believe that the virus, COVID-19, could have escaped from a Chinese lab. That's where they think the origin really came from. Coronaviruses are a large group of viruses. They cause respiratory diseases in humans, from a common cold to severe acute respiratory syndrome. SARS. Now, these papers were written by military scientists and senior Chinese public health officials as part of their research on the origins of COVID-19. They described SARS coronaviruses as this new era of genetic weapons, even referencing work from US Air Force Colonel Mitchell J. Ainscough, who thought World War III may be fought with bioweapons. In this paper as well, it stated that when SARS hit China back in 2003, they believed that it could have been a man-made bioweapon deliberately unleashed. So this isn't the first time officials have talked about bioweapons like this before. Chairman of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Selection Committee was quoted in The Sun saying, "China's evident interest in bioweapons is extremely concerning." Tom Tugendhat continues to say that the decision by China's top military scientists to engage in discussions about biological weapons was in itself a concerning development. He goes on to explain that this is not a fringe scientist talking about it in sort of a conspiracy type way. This is a mainstream scientist who's got the ear of leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, who is talking about some of the most dangerous weapons the world has ever known. It's concerning in the first place that this is a major Chinese scientific institution talking about these types of weapons. Liberal Senator James Patterson says he holds concerns about China's lack of transparency, even describing the actions as obstructive. I mean, yeah, weapons of mass destruction include nuclear, radiological, and chemical weapons. If you can produce and release toxins deliberately to cause harm in humans, I mean, even me just saying that out loud sounds like a DC Batman villain. So these authors of this document fully believe that World War III will be biological, unlike the first two that were described as chemical and nuclear. The core weapon will be these biological and genetic weapons like coronavirus. That's their thing. The scientists say that these attacks shouldn't be carried out during a clear day because intense sunlight can damage the pathogens and rain and snow can affect the aerosol particles. So they actually suggest that this thing be released at nighttime or at least dawn or dusk. Cloudy weather works too. The wind just has to be going in a stable direction so the aerosol can float in the targeted area. Now I gotta be afraid of wind. Awesome. I'm gonna need an airzuka just to get that out of here. The research also notes that an attack like this would result in a surge of patients that need hospital treatment, so this could collapse the enemy's medical system. Another concerning factor in all this is China's gain of function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is near the location of the initial COVID outbreak, and virologists are creating new viruses that are said to be more transmissible and more lethal. Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, a chemical weapons expert, says China thwarted all attempts to regulate and police its laboratories where such experiments were taking place. Now, this was reported May 7th, less than a week ago. This comes from the book What Really Happened in Wuhan, which is set to release publicly September 29th, 2021. Add that to your Kindle reading list, folks. Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Peter Jennings, state that this document is as close to a smoking gun as we've got. It's significant because it clearly shows that Chinese scientists were thinking about military use for different strains of coronavirus, and they were thinking about how it could be deployed. He says that if this was a case of transmission from a wet market, it would be in China's interest to cooperate, but so far they've done the opposite of that. This document has 18 authors part of it: People's Liberation Army, scientists, weapon experts, and with Robert Potter, cybersecurity specialist, even chiming in himself after analyzing the leaked documents, he believes that the document is definitely not fake. So intelligence agencies suspect that COVID-19 may be the result of an accidental Wuhan lab leak, but of course there isn't enough evidence to suggest that it was intentionally released. And also, these things are just coming out new and we're reading articles, so take what we say as a grain of salt. We're not CNN. We're not going to tell you to drink bleach at the end of this. But we are going to tell you to subscribe and hit that like button at the bottom if you enjoyed this video. What do you guys think about all of this? Do you think COVID-19 was actually released as a bioweapon? Or is it just Mother Nature telling us to get our gear and to stop treating each other like garbage? Let us know all your thoughts, theories, and comments down below. Thank you so much for tuning in to Life's Biggest Questions. I've been your host for today, Taylor McWaters, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe. Don't drink bleach. Bye.
You know why you clicked this video, and you must be just as sick as the next guy to truly wonder what the top 10 countries that could start a world war are. But hey, I'm the guy scripting and hosting this one, so what does that say about me? Great minds think alike, that's what it says. Now, as we know, following the Second World War, the UN was created to pretty much ensure it never happens again. And it seems that the collective of countries' leaders from all over the world have done a pretty good job at just that, preventing world wars from breaking out. Usually when two countries, or even more than two countries, are going at it, the UN comes together to try to find a resolution before things really continue to escalate. So the reality of a third world war is quite unlikely. It's very detrimental to all those involved, especially the citizens who get caught up in it all. That being said, for hypothetical reasons, of course, we're counting down the top 10 countries that could start World War III. Smash that like button and let's try to get this one to at least 690 likes. You guys know why. Yeah, nice. Starting us off at number 10, we got Russia. It's no secret that relations between the United States and Russia have been a hot topic of discussion ever since the Cold War. Even though not a single shot was fired, these two countries found themselves in a game of back and forth for decades before cooler heads finally prevailed. Well, I guess they were pretty cool the whole time, just threatening each other with nukes, with very few actually ending up going into combat. Regardless, over the last few years with Trump and Putin's relationship, and now Biden and Putin, I mean, it's no secret that there is some tension there for sure. But again, this isn't even so much how or why they could start a war, but just that they would be capable of doing so. And given that Russia is incredibly well equipped in regards to numerous aspects, from their actual military to their cybersecurity and abilities, as well as nuclear weapons, if Russia decided they wanted to start a world war, well, I think Putin and company would be very capable of doing so. Who they start it with could be a debate, with some thinking the United States is an obvious enemy. However, Russia may not want to necessarily go after the US, and instead may have their sights set on potential threats or enemies. At number 9, China. Another one of the world's biggest and most powerful countries, both from a military and economic side. China not only has the money, but the manpower to see themselves have a fighting chance in a world war. Literally. Now, something that Russia and China would potentially team up in a war, given that they are not only close geographically, but also have somewhat similar ideologies, at least in the sense of an Eastern world versus Western world mentality. However, as I've mentioned in previous videos, it's also quite possible they see each other as a threat. Which one is more powerful? Who has the bigger army? Who has more money? Similar to how the Cold War was with Russia and the US, both Russia and China could find themselves potentially in a conflict, trying to prove to each other and the world who the true superpower of a country is. Naturally, this would lead to numerous other countries in surrounding territories to likely get involved. However, I'm sure the US would want to try to put an immediate stop to this one, because it seems China versus Russia would be inevitable for a world war to break out. And the same could be said if they decided to ally and attack another country. scary times. On to number 8, we got Iran. One of the most powerful countries in the Middle East. It's definitely not a secret that if Iran wanted to start a world war, they're more than capable of doing so as well. As we know, the US withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran, which at the time was a pretty big deal. I mean, it's still a pretty big deal, but it seems with the pandemic, that kind of had to take a back seat. With that being said, Iran claims they aren't so focused on making nukes, but it seems other countries aren't so quick to just take their word for it. Regardless of the nuclear warfare capabilities, Iran's army is also quite powerful, and given the whole ordeal with one of their top commanders being taken out in Qasem Soleimani, well, the state swore revenge not only on Trump, but America as a whole. Now, it seems cooler heads have prevailed, and maybe an all-out war isn't what the Middle Eastern country is vying for, but this isn't so much about whether or not they'd want to, but more so if they'd be capable of doing it in the first place. Now, technically, you could argue that any country could start a war with another, but for it to lead to a world war, numerous countries would need to be involved, and with Iran having a common enemy in the US with a few neighboring countries, well, all I'm saying is who knows. On to number 7, we got Japan. One of the last countries to withdraw from the previous world war. This country is clearly made of fighters, and given the threats made toward them after it was announced that the US and Japan would be doing joint military drills together, well, it seems quite evident that the United States has Japan's back and vice versa. The countries' relations have significantly improved over the years, and it seems Japan and the United States, among a handful of other countries, see each other as allies. More specifically, the US has become known to be very protective of Japan, in the sense that if anyone were to declare war against them, it seems very evident that the US would quickly step in to stop anything from getting too out of hand, if you get what I'm saying. At number 6, we got Israel. It's no secret that the last few weeks have been tense in the Middle East, specifically with clashes between Israel and Palestine. And although a ceasefire has since been agreed upon, it seems quite evident that Israel is also capable of starting a world war. Much like Iran, it seems Israel is supported by numerous countries, including the United States, who have common enemies with each other. And it's no secret that Israel isn't the most welcome country in the Middle East, with Syria and Lebanon firing rockets in their direction over the last week as well. So it seems quite evident that it wouldn't take much from Israel to garner a reaction from numerous surrounding countries. And as you can imagine, if a handful of the surrounding countries did attack Israel, similar to what happened in 1948, the day after Israel declared themselves an independent country, I think it's safe to say countries who see Israel as an ally would be more than willing to step in now, say before when they barely knew the country even existed. Halfway to number 5, India. Yet another powerhouse of a military. Given India's sheer size, they would easily be able to start a world war should they go after the right or wrong country. Let me just clarify, there is no right country to go after in a world war. Let me just make that very clear. Especially given that they've been clashing with China, who also has a powerhouse military, it seems quite evident that if two of the most populated countries with some of the most powerful militaries were to go to war, other countries would certainly get involved. Even from the standpoint of trying to keep the peace, as could be said for any of the countries I've mentioned thus far, if the United States tries to find a way to broker a deal and China doesn't like it, who's to say they don't bring the United States into the war? Now, I don't think that would happen, but again, when it comes to war, it truly does seem there are no rules. We know what happened in World War II. Germany and the USSR had a truce, which Germany was never planning to live up to. So all I'm saying is, when it comes to war, it truly is unpredictable who does what. Of course, there are also tensions with neighboring Pakistan and India, which people have feared may boil over into war, with the conflict dating back now 75 years plus. Now at number 4, North Korea. With all that has happened with North Korea over the last few years, the missiles, the nuke testing, whatever else they don't want to tell us about, it seems it really is a ticking time bomb. Given the state of the country, it really is hard to have a full understanding of their military capabilities and how far along they are in regards to weapons. That being said, time and time again, they're launching missiles to test them while landing dangerously close to neighboring countries. They've been warned multiple times, but it almost seems like they're taunting someone to do something. Naturally, we don't know how strong the relation of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, is with other countries' leaders. For all we know, he and Putin are boys. Maybe they just team up and take over. I'm just saying, you never know. At number 3, South Korea. Now, it's no secret that relations between North and South Korea aren't hunky-dory. In fact, just 2 hours ago, NBC posted an article about South Korea's president meeting with Biden to de-escalate tensions with North Korea as threats are looming. These two sides have been on the brink of war, or so it seems, since they've split. Given that the two countries have very different ideologies, I understand why they may not see eye to eye, but again, going off of what I've been saying the whole time, common enemies. The US is a huge ally with South Korea as well as Japan, so naturally, North Korea attacks South Korea, Japan and the US go after North Korea, and then China gets involved, especially if they're going after Taiwan. I mean, you guys see how it all gets connected here and then everyone kind of just gets involved somehow? Now on to number 2, Germany. I mean, we know what happened the last time Germany started a world war, but this time it seems things would be incredibly different. Given that Germany is an ally with numerous European and North American countries, as well as being a part of NATO, on top of the fact that they have one of the strongest militaries in the world, if they wanted to start a world war, they could. Who they would go after would likely be in retaliation to being attacked, as Germany hasn't been aggressive when it comes to this kind of stuff since, well, I mean, you know. That being said, any country who is a part of NATO could likely start a world war, given that the pact sees all 30 countries involved will protect and defend each other should a war break out. Speaking of NATO, in at number 1, America! America! Need I say more? The most powerful military, all the money. There's a reason why a war hasn't been fought on American soil in God knows how many years. You go after the US, they'll destroy your country. Literally. Now, some see this as a good thing, while others find it absolutely disgusting. Regardless of opinions, one thing is certain. If the United States wanted to start a world war, it seems of all the countries, they would be the most capable. Then again, what does that mean to be the most capable? If anything, it seems likely that the US would be capable of inflicting some of the most destruction. However, the same could be said for any country with nukes or a very powerful military, such as Russia, China, India. I mean, the list goes on and on. And that's not to take away from the previous countries I mentioned either, but it seems Russia, China, and the United States specifically are the top 3 countries with the strongest military, biggest budget, and likelihood to really rock the world if they wanted to. All in all, guys, I don't think a third world war will ever break out. Unfortunately, it seems war is always going to be a part of our society. I wish it wasn't, but unfortunately it is. That being said, I think we learned from our mistakes. You know, there's an old saying in the world, I mean, they say it a lot here in Toronto, I'm sure it goes worldwide. It goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, well, you can't get fooled again. All I'm saying, guys, is peace and love will lead the way. For now, let's do some common replies from the video. What if China wins World War III? False Prophet said, here's the thing, a war between the US and China could only end in total devastation if either country invaded the other. I guarantee China would sooner end the world than surrender, and the US would probably do something similar. So I disagree because it depends on who the allies, like if it was China and Russia against like Canada, the US, France, Germany, I think it would escalate so quickly, or there would be fears of such quick escalation, if you get what I'm saying, where it's like really serious stuff could go down, that they would try to make sure it didn't happen in the first place. Like the second one country got invaded, I think all the other countries would be like, whoa, hold on, let's not do that. I think people really do not want World War to happen. XD Xbox said, who said the US was losing a war? US is hiding something in Area 51. Interesting. I think the Kyles, when they did the Naruto running, drinking Monster Energy drinks, I think they determined there are no aliens there. Could be wrong though. Robert Fugate said, America lose an actual war? LOL, okay. See, that's the thing, like, people think America could lose a war, but it's impossible, because when America invades your country, they come, guns shooting up in the air, there's mighty big explosions behind them, the song America, yeah, by, from Team America, that World Police, that's playing, you know, they're coming on their Hummers, and they got their beer. I'm just trying to think of like very cheeseburgers, some very stereotypical like American cliches, because guys, I'm half American. I live in Toronto. I was born and raised here, but I'm half American, and I truly do feel like my American identity. I'm proud to be American. I know it's like not a popular thing to say nowadays. I still think it's one of the greatest countries in the world. Shoot me. Like, I'm sorry, but I genuinely think it is. Anyways, guys, that's all for this one. I've been your host, Jared Bronstein. Call me Pepper, actually, and we'll see you soon. I genuinely like to believe that there will never be a third world war. It may be naive of me to believe this, but following what happened on September 11th, 2001, well, it seemed almost certain a world war was imminent, and it didn't happen. There was a war, but it didn't seem the entire world wanted any part of it. In fact, it seems countries all over the world have realized the amount of loss, destruction, and time it takes to rebuild following a catastrophic world war. So why engage in the first place? With all that being said, since the Second World War has ended, there have been countless wars all over the world involving multiple countries. And many of these could have led to world wars, but didn't. With all that being said, as tensions between China and the United States continue to rise, some are once again fearing an attack and retaliation, leading to a third world war. Today in LBQ, we're asking, what if China wins World War III? Smash that like button and let's get into this one. Now, first and foremost, I think the most important factor to look at prior to talking about how the world would change post a China World War win is looking at the teams. Who's fighting who? Is it Russia and China against the Middle East? Given that the previous two world wars included military superpowers, including America, the UK, Germany, China, Russia, and so on, we always assume these countries would be involved in any world war. But what if they weren't? What even constitutes a world war? Because as far far as I'm concerned, a lot of countries weren't a part of either of the previous two. Switzerland has famously gone neutral during both world wars, and a handful of South American countries didn't take part in World War I, while a handful of European countries remained neutral throughout World War II. The point I'm making is that if China were to be involved in a world war and won, that doesn't necessarily mean America or other European countries would be directly involved. So let's take a look at teams here. Odds are China would find a way to team up with Russia, as it appears the two countries' leaders are quite fond of each other. Given that they would have a common enemy in the United States, it would also make sense that they would appear to see eye to eye. Another country which would likely want to join the pair would be North Korea. However, as we've seen, North Korea appears to like to do things on their own, almost as if they really got something to prove to the world. Whether they'd be willing to ally with another country and whether or not China and Russia would be willing to ally with North Korea is a totally different story. Given that Japan and South Korea have close ties to the United States, it seems all three countries would need to get involved to protect the two nations much closer to the danger in Japan and South Korea. See, inevitably it seems the United States does get involved because they are allies, but that doesn't necessarily mean they go all in. It's possible, much like prior to officially entering the Second World War, the United States tries to support their allies from afar without actually deploying troops and going to war with any country. Of course, the reason for the war in the first place would be of utmost importance when looking at this question. If, for example, China decided to attack a neighboring country in hopes of expanding their presence geographically, Russia could see that as a potential threat. This would of course change the entire course of how things play out, meaning we'd have to disregard everything I just said previously with the whole Russia-China alliance. So intention here is also incredibly important. Now, if we go under the impression that China simply wants to prove they're the world's superpower with the strongest military and best economy, you know, a game of look how big my Johnson is, then it's possible they attack the United States or decide to go after a small country. Either way, assuming that China is able to win a third world war, what happens next? Well, as we saw with World War II in Europe, the loss of a war doesn't necessarily mean you lose your country forever. So if China were to attack even Russia, and when all is said and done, Russia were to surrender, that doesn't necessarily mean the country of Russia would no longer exist. As we saw at the end of the Second World War, albeit 10 years later, Germany was at one point occupied by both the Soviets and Allies before the Allies gave up their military occupation and gave the country back. So again, intention is important. If China is trying to expand geographically, well then, if they were to win, I don't think they'd be giving any land back to anyone. If it was more so just to show how strong they are military-wise, well that would be a very different story. Regardless if the United States were to be involved in a third world war or not, I think following a win for China, a fourth world war would happen sooner than later. Assuming America does enter the third world war and they lose along with whoever else is on their team, say the UK, Germany, Canada, whoever else, let's just say they lose, surrender, white flag, and ask for a ceasefire. Now, depending on the terms of the ceasefire, it may just be a stalling tactic to lose the battle, but win the war. I mean, I guess they would lose the war, but then start another one and win that one. Here's what I mean. America is clearly not afraid to push the boundaries and show the world they're willing to do what it takes to remain a powerful nation. If, for whatever reason, they were to lose a third world war to China, I could very well see them regrouping and attacking the country, declaring a fourth world war, this time using nuclear force. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but so does the idea of China winning World War III. Is my American showing right now? Oh boy. On a more serious note, everyone claims to have nukes nowadays. The US, Russia, China, North Korea, the Middle East, it seems at any given moment, any of these countries can wipe another country off the face of the earth if they really do have the weapons they claim to have. And just to clarify, the Middle East, I meant like all of the countries there. I know the Middle East isn't a country. And with all that in mind, well, as we saw before, America is always willing to defend their people regardless of what it takes. Meaning if they needed to surrender and lose World War III to reduce the loss of immediate life while they work on nuclear weapons with every intention of starting a fourth world war, well, I'd believe it. I know America surrendering sounds crazy, but they wouldn't want a country to get bold and nuke them. So instead, I could see them taking a temporary L, almost fooling the world that they've folded, only to come back 10 times stronger and to show the world that you can never count America out. Of course, this would go against so many international laws and violate things that have been implemented so innocent lives don't need to be lost during wars. But unfortunately, when it comes to true war, there are no rules. Thankfully, this will never happen. Love and peace always prevails, right guys? Alright, for now, let's do some comment replies from the video. Why is China preparing for World War III? Cami Tenchi said, strange, I literally just watched a video about China threatening to launch a missile on Australia, and then I saw this video. It's all threat. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's all threats. It's all talks until something happens. It's just, like I said, it's a game of, you know, mine's bigger than yours. Everyone wants to show who has the stronger nukes, the bigger missiles. I don't think anyone actually wants to go to war. It's too costly. Like, I know they say war makes money, but at first it costs a lot of money. Tony Yemen said, because it's necessary to prepare for World War III. I disagree. Like Einstein said, World War III is going to be fought with sticks and stones. Second one person goes, the nukes are flying, we're all done, so I don't think it's happening. Kirby Madness said, the time for peace is over. I literally just ended this video being like, peace and love. Like, what's Kirby? Come on, man. What's the deal? All right, guys, that's all for this one. I've been your host, Pepper. As I said before, peace and love, guys. We don't need to go to war. Just stay spicy. I'll see you guys soon.